The dawn light broke through the Montana pines like golden fingers reaching for something sacred. 5 Harley-Davidson motorcycles circled the old farmhouse, their chrome gleaming with menace, their engines rumbling low and hungry like wolves waiting for the kill command. Jackson Rivers stood on the weathered front porch, a Remington 870 shotgun cradled in his calloused hands. At 52 years old, he had learned to read violence the way other men read weather patterns. The morning air tasted of gasoline fumes and coming bloodshed. His finger rested alongside the trigger guard. Not on it. Not yet. Behind him through the screen door, Margaret Hartwell gripped her late husband's Korean War M1 carbine. She was 73 years old, her hands marked with arthritis and age spots, but steady as mountain stone. The rifle had killed men in frozen valleys half a world away. It would kill again if necessary. The lead biker killed his engine. The sudden silence felt louder than the roar had been. He removed his helmet slowly, deliberately, revealing a face carved from hard miles and harder choices. Vince Carver. Jackson had ridden with him for 20 years. Last chance, Hawk. Vince's voice carried across the gravel driveway like a funeral bell. Walk away, or we burn it down with the old lady inside. Jackson felt the shotgun's weight, familiar as prayer. You boys picked the wrong house, the wrong man, the wrong day. One of the younger bikers, Derek Stone, reached toward the pistol tucked in his waistband. His hand moved with meth-fueled confidence, the kind of stupid bravery that got people killed before breakfast. Jackson chambered around. The sound cut through the mountain air with mechanical finality. Cha-chunk. 5 bikers against 1 man and 1 woman should have been simple mathematics. But mathematics did not account for will, for fury, for the kind of love that made dying seem reasonable. The moment stretched, hung, crystallized. To understand how a decorated Gulf War hero ended up in a standoff with the most dangerous motorcycle gang in Montana, we need to go back. 3 months ago, to the day Jackson Rivers stopped running from his past. October painted Montana in colors that hurt to look at. Gold aspens against pine green, frost making the morning grass crunch beneath the tires of Jackson's 1984 Harley-Davidson FXST Softail. The bike was black and chrome, Evolution engine rumbling with the particular note only old Harleys make. He had been riding for 3 days straight. No destination, no plan, just movement, just distance. The leather vest he wore carried no patches anymore, no club colors. He had cut them off with kitchen scissors in a Motel 6 outside Reno, standing over a trash can that already held 2 empty whiskey bottles and the last shreds of who he used to be. He almost rode past her. Almost. Margaret Hartwell stood in her driveway wrestling with an impossible task. A stack of split oak logs rose taller than her diminished height, balanced precariously on a makeshift dolly whose wheel had given up sometime during the Eisenhower administration. She was trying to move winter's warmth from woodpile to porch, 1 armload at a time, her body betraying the determination her spirit still commanded. Jackson saw her, and something in his chest caught. A memory surfaced. Kuwait, 1991. A family fleeing burning oil fields. The sky turned black at noon, the mother carrying water jugs too heavy for her frame. He had helped them. The village got hit by Iraqi artillery the next day. He never knew if they made it. His foot touched the brake almost before his brain registered the decision. The Harley's engine grumbled to idle, then silence. Jackson sat there for 30 seconds, hands still on the grips. Every instinct screamed to ride away. Getting involved meant complications, meant staying, meant caring. But another voice spoke beneath the fear. The voice that still remembered who he had been before the war broke him. That voice said 4 words that changed everything. Leave no one behind. Jackson killed the engine completely, dismounted. His knee protested, the one that still carried Iraqi shrapnel too deep to remove. He walked toward the woman, each step feeling like walking towards something he could not take back. Ma'am, he said, his voice emerged rougher than he wanted. Looks like you could use a hand. Margaret straightened slowly, one weathered hand pressed to her lower back. Her blue eyes, sharp as broken glass, studied him completely. She took in the leather vest, the graying beard, the roadmap of violence written across his knuckles. Most 73-year-old women would have hurried inside and locked the door. She smiled instead. That's very kind of you, young man. Jackson almost laughed. 52 years old, and no one had called him young in decades. I'm afraid I bit off more than I can chew today, Margaret continued, gesturing at the woodpile. Jackson crossed the yard. Up close, he could see the arthritis gnarling her fingers, the careful way she favored her left leg. Let me take that, ma'am. He transferred the logs from her arms to his. Where do you want these? Just inside the front door would be wonderful. There's a wood box right by the hearth. Jackson followed her through a door that had welcomed 47 years of Montana seasons. Inside, the house hit him like sensory memory, copper pots hanging from ceiling hooks, mason jars lined with dried herbs, the smell of fresh baked bread, the kind his grandmother had made in a Tennessee kitchen that existed now only in memory. Family photographs covered the mantel. 3 children at various ages. A wedding photo. One photograph stood separate. A young man in Marine Corps dress blues, eyes bright with certainty. Jackson stacked the wood neatly, aware of Margaret watching him. Thank you, she said when he turned. I don't get many visitors out here, especially ones willing to lend a hand without being asked. He started toward the door, toward his bike, toward the road that had no memory. But Margaret's voice stopped him. I've got coffee on the stove, apple pie cooling on the counter, my grandmother's recipe. You're welcome to stay for a piece if you have time. The offer caught him completely unprepared. When was the last time someone had invited him to share a meal without wanting something in return? Jackson looked back at this woman, seeing something he could not quite name. Not pity, not fear, just simple human kindness offered without conditions. I don't want to impose. No imposition at all. I made the whole pie and there's only me to eat it. Seems a shame to let it go to waste. Jackson hesitated. Every instinct told him to decline. But the afternoon was growing cold, and something about this woman made him want to remember what it felt like to be treated like a human being instead of a threat. All right, just for a few minutes. Those few minutes would become hours, then days, then something that looked remarkably like home. Margaret's kitchen existed outside of time. The wood-burning stove radiated heat that seemed to seep into bones that had been cold for years. She moved through the space with practiced efficiency, pulling down ceramic mugs that had survived children and grandchildren and the general entropy of living. The apple pie sat cooling on a wire rack, steam still rising from the golden crust. Cream or sugar? Margaret asked, pouring coffee from a blue enamel percolator. Black's fine. The coffee was strong and rich. Real coffee. Jackson wrapped his hands around the mug's warmth. This is real good coffee, ma'am. Margaret, was she corrected gently. And thank you. I grind the beans myself every morning. Old habits. Jackson took a bite of the pie and had to suppress a groan. This is incredible. Margaret's eyes crinkled with pleasure. My mother's recipe. She taught me when I was barely tall enough to see over the counter. She studied his face. You look like a man who's been living off diner food for a while. Jackson found himself smiling. Guilty as charged. Been on the road for a few days. Where are you headed? North maybe, or west. Haven't decided yet. Just seeing the country. Margaret nodded. On the wall behind her, family photographs hung in mismatched frames. You have family? He asked. Margaret's expression softened. 3 children, all grown and scattered. Jenny's in Seattle, runs a bookstore. Paul teaches at a college in Vermont. She paused and something shifted in her voice. And Thomas, he was my youngest. The past tense hung in the air. I'm sorry, Jackson said. He was 22, full of dreams and plans. Margaret's voice grew distant. Sometimes I still catch myself setting 4 places at the table instead of 1. Jackson thought of his own daughter, Claire, 28 years old now. When had he last spoken to her? 3 years? 4? You have children? Margaret asked. A daughter, Claire. Haven't seen her in a while. Margaret waited, but when he did not elaborate, she simply nodded. Children have a way of breaking our hearts and mending them all at once. They sat in comfortable silence. Jackson found himself relaxing in a way he had not in years. There was something about Margaret's presence that made him want to lower his defenses. You're not from around here, Margaret observed. California originally. Been riding through the Northwest. Pretty country up here. Peaceful. It is that. Robert and I moved here in 1978. He was a carpenter. Said he wanted to build us a life where we could see the stars at night. Robert was your husband? 45 years. He's been gone 3 years now. Heart attack while working in the garden. Margaret touched the thin gold band she still wore. The doctor said he didn't suffer, but I still talk to him sometimes. Jackson understood that kind of solitude. Must get lonely. Sometimes, but lonely and alone aren't always the same thing. She smiled. Tell me about yourself, Jackson. Where did you serve? The question landed hard. How did you know? My Robert was Navy, Korea. You have that look, the way you stand. That's military training. Jackson exhaled slowly. Marines, 4 years, 1989 to 1993. Vietnam, Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, Saudi Arabia, then Kuwait during liberation. I was 19, fresh out of boot camp. Thought we were going to stop Saddam Hussein, make the world safe. And did you? Jackson's laugh carried no humor. We stopped him, liberated Kuwait. Mission accomplished, they said. But some of us brought the war home anyway. Margaret did not interrupt, just listened with patience. Got hit by Iraqi artillery shrapnel near Basra Highway. February 91. Took metal in my back, shoulder, left leg. They pulled out what they could, but I've still got pieces setting off metal detectors. Jackson touched his shoulder reflexively. 3 months in Naval Hospital in San Diego. Learning to walk. Learning to live with pain. And the pain pills? Jackson met her eyes. Saw only compassion. Started with Percocet, ended with anything I could find. By the time they released me, I was hooked. Couldn't hold a job. Couldn't hold a relationship. Your wife left? Linda, yeah, she tried for years. We had a daughter, Claire, born in 96. I was 24, thought fatherhood would fix what was broken. But the pills, the anger, the nightmares. Jackson's voice dropped. Linda left when Claire was 12. Said she couldn't watch me destroy myself. Said she wouldn't let me destroy our daughter too. And she was right. Margaret refilled his coffee in silence. My Robert had nightmares from Korea for 40 years. The men who came home from those wars, they carried weight no one else could see. The Hells Angels, Jackson said. After Linda left, I was lost. Met some guys at a VA bar. Ex-Marines, all broken. They wore leather vests. Said they were the only family we'd ever need. 1998. I joined the Riverside chapter. For a while, it felt right. Brotherhood, purpose, code. But something changed. Jackson nodded. Started running drugs, collections, intimidation. The Brotherhood became a prison. What made you leave? 3 months ago, the president wanted me to beat up a guy who owed money. Guy was 65, veteran, terminal cancer. I told him I didn't survive Desert Storm to become the enemy. That's when I knew I had to get out. And here you are, Margaret said softly. Here I am, running again, like always. Or maybe you're not running anymore. Maybe you just haven't realized you've been looking for a place to stop. The words hit Jackson like physical impact. He took another bite of pie, and for the first time in 3 decades, tasted something that felt remarkably like hope. Jackson did not leave that day, or the next, or the one after that. 4 days later, Jackson returned with groceries, coffee, flour, sugar, the good butter. He found her in the garden. Time slowed. Margaret knelt between tomato plants, one hand pressed to her chest, the other reaching for her walking stick beyond her grasp. Her face had gone gray, lips tinged blue. The basket of tomatoes lay on its side, red fruit scattered like blood drops. Jackson's training kicked in. He vaulted the fence, knee screaming protest, reached her in 3 strides. Margaret, stay with me, eyes on me. Her eyes found his, unfocused. Can't breathe right. Jackson's hands moved with automatic precision. Checked airway, clear. Breathing shallow, pulse weak but steady. His mind ran through possibilities. Heart attack, stroke, none good. I'm calling an ambulance. He pulled out his phone. In my kitchen, emergency contact list. Call Dr. Miller first. Jackson scooped her up, struck by how light she felt. He carried her inside, placed her on the couch, covered her with a handmade quilt. The emergency list was exactly where she said. Dr. Richard Miller's number at the top. No local family, no one close. Dr. Miller arrived within 10 minutes. He examined Margaret while Jackson paced like a caged animal. Blood pressure elevated but stable. Could be her heart. Could be medication interaction. Hospital and billings for tests. I'll drive her. Dr. Miller looked at him, taking in the leather vest, the tattoos. And you are? A friend, Margaret said, voice stronger. Jackson's been helping me. He probably saved my life. The ambulance will be here in 20 minutes. Better to let paramedics handle transport. 3 hours later, Jackson sat in the emergency room, surrounded by fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. Margaret was behind double doors, and he felt helpless. He stared at the torn photograph in his wallet, him and Claire from her 16th birthday. They both looked like strangers. Dr. Miller emerged. She's going to be fine. Mild heart episode. Needs rest and monitoring. Someone to stay with her. What about family? Nearest relative is a niece in Denver. Left a message. Dr. Miller studied Jackson. Margaret says you're staying to help. Jackson realized he had decided without thinking. That's right. That's significant responsibility. Margaret pushes herself too hard. I understand, sir. Sir. Dr. Miller's expression shifted. You serve? Marines, 4 years. Desert Storm. Recognition. Respect. Navy corpsman. Same theater. Something changed in his eyes. Welcome home, brother. Welcome home. Oh, Margaret Hartwell is one of the finest people I know. If you're going to be around, you'll be held to a high standard. I wouldn't expect anything less, sir. They brought Margaret out in a wheelchair, looking tired but alert. She squeezed Jackson's hand. Thank you. Jackson had never felt so needed in his life. The trouble started at Miller's General Store 2 days later. Behind the counter, Frank Miller watched Jackson with unconcealed suspicion. 72, Dr. Miller's father, World War II veteran. You're the one staying out at Margaret's place, Frank said. Accusation, not question. That's right. Jackson placed his basket on the counter. Soup, crackers, tea. Frank rang up purchases with deliberate slowness. Known Margaret since 78. Good woman. Deserves better than trouble. Just helping a neighbor, sir. Neighbor. Frank's laugh was sharp. That what they're calling it now? The store's bell chimed. Sheriff Dale Crawford entered, presence filling the space. 56, built solid, eyes assessing. Mr. Rivers, heard you've been staying at the Hartwell place. Mrs. Hartwell had a health scare. I'm helping during recovery. Very neighborly. Sheriff Crawford's hand rested on his service weapon. Mind if we step outside for a chat? Not a request. Jackson paid and followed him onto the sidewalk, aware half the store watched through windows. Let's take a walk. They walked to the edge of town where sidewalk ended and gravel began. I ran your plates, Sheriff Crawford said without preamble. Found some interesting reading. Assault, 1999. Weapons charges, 2002. Drug trafficking, 2008. All connected to Hell's Angels Riverside chapter. Jackson had expected this. I've paid my debts. Because witnesses disappeared or changed stories. Sheriff Crawford stopped, faced him. Here's what I see. Career criminal playing Good Samaritan with vulnerable widow. Woman's got 47 acres, no close family. Makes me wonder about your angle. There's no angle, Sheriff. There's always an angle. Crawford stepped closer. Margaret Hartwell is a treasure. Taught half this county's kids. If you're running a con, if you hurt her, I will destroy you, legal or otherwise. Understand? Jackson met his eyes. I understand you're protecting people. I respect that. But I give you my word as a Marine, I mean Mrs. Hartwell no harm. She gave me kindness. I'm repaying it. Word of a criminal doesn't carry weight. Then judge me by my actions. Watch me. Follow me. But I'm staying until Margaret's safe. Jackson's voice carried quiet authority. That's not negotiable. Standoff, 2 men from different worlds. Finally, Crawford nodded. I'll be watching. One slip, one complaint, you're gone. Fair enough, sir. That evening, Margaret received a long phone call. When she hung up, trouble marked her expression. That was Meredith Walsh from Town Council. There's been concern about your presence. Talk of calling a special meeting. Jackson felt his stomach tighten. Are you having second thoughts? Absolutely not, but I thought you should know. Margaret showed him an envelope slipped under her door. Block letters, dangerous, get rid of him. Maybe I should go. The only problem, Margaret said firmly, is this town has forgotten how to extend grace to strangers. The town council meeting was held Tuesday evening in the community center. Margaret insisted they face it together. Running never solved anything. These people need to see who you really are. Inside, folding chairs faced a long table where 5 council members sat. About 40 residents attended. Jackson recognized Frank Miller and others, all watching with suspicion. Chairwoman Meredith Walsh explained that concerns had been raised about a transient individual staying with Margaret Hartwell. Mrs. Hartwell, we understand you've been hosting this gentleman. Some residents have expressed concern for your safety. Margaret stood slowly, using her walking stick. Her voice carried 30 years of teaching authority. I appreciate everyone's concern, but I'm 73, not senile, and perfectly capable of making my own decisions. Jackson Rivers has been nothing but helpful. He probably saved my life, and he's asked for nothing in return. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Crawford spoke from the back. With respect, Mrs. Hartwell, Mr. Rivers has a criminal record. The Hells Angels are a criminal enterprise. And, Margaret's tone sharpened, are we judging people solely by their worst moments? Because most of us would fail that test. The question isn't where someone came from. It's where they're going and whether we'll help them get there. Jackson felt every gaze. Margaret continued, I want to tell you about the man I've come to know. A man who helps strangers without being asked, who sits through medical emergencies asking nothing in return, who listens with genuine compassion. She paused. When my Thomas died 20 years ago, this community rallied. You brought casseroles, offered shoulders, showed me grace. I'm asking you to show that same grace now. The mention of Thomas shifted something. Tom Bradley spoke. But Mrs. Hartwell, what if he brings trouble? What if enemies come looking? Jackson stood. Silence fell. Mr. Bradley raises a fair point. I can't promise my past won't follow, but I can promise if it does, I'll leave before anyone gets hurt. He looked around. I know what you see. Leather, tattoos, reputation. I've been exactly what you fear. Jackson's voice strengthened, but Mrs. Hartwell saw something else, something I'd forgotten. He paused. I served my country, Marines, Desert Storm, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. I was a good Marine before I became broken. Maybe I can be a good man again, if you'll give me the chance. Silence stretched. Dr. Miller spoke. Margaret's judgment has always been sound. If she vouches for him, that carries weight. Others nodded, not everyone, but enough. Frank Miller stood. My nephew came back from Iraq broken. PTSD, addiction. Took 10 years to find his way with help. Maybe Rivers deserves the same chance. The council voted 3-2 to take no action. Conditions, weekly check-ins, any complaint triggers review. Walking home under countless stars, Margaret linked her arm through Jackson's. That wasn't so bad. Jackson thought about the faces, fear giving way to understanding. You stood up for me. Why? Because people who need grace most are least likely to ask, and I believe in second chances. Margaret squeezed his arm. My Thomas used to say, every person is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Kindness costs nothing, but can mean everything. For the first time in years, Jackson felt like he might deserve the chance being given. They walked in comfortable silence, accompanied by cricket songs and October wind. Above, stars wheeled in ancient patterns, marking time with celestial patience. Inside, Jackson helped Margaret settle by the fire. He built up flames with wood he had split himself. Margaret pulled out the yellowed newspaper she had carried for 20 years. The one with Thomas's photograph. The one that would change everything. But not tonight. Tonight was for hope. Tomorrow would bring truth. For now, they sat together in warm silence. An old woman and a broken man, building a family from grace and second chances in the belief that redemption was possible even for those who thought themselves beyond saving. Outside, another motorcycle passed on the distant highway. Jackson did not flinch, did not feel the pull to follow. For the first time in 30 years, he was exactly where he needed to be. Home. The morning after this town meeting arrived with deceptive calm. Dawn light filtered through Margaret's kitchen windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Neither had slept much. Jackson sat at the oak table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, knuckles white with tension he could not name. Margaret stood by the stove, her back to him, movements slower than usual. When she finally turned, she held a yellowed newspaper clipping in her weathered hands. The paper trembled, slightly, though whether from arthritis or emotion, Jackson could not tell. "I think it's time you knew the whole truth," Margaret said quietly. She crossed to the table and placed the clipping before him with the careful precision of someone handling explosives. Jackson stared at the headline, Pinewood Valley Gazette, October 17, 2004. The words blurred, then sharpened into terrible clarity. Local man killed in motorcycle crash. Hells Angels members involved. And the photograph beneath the headline showed a young man in Marine Corps dress blues, 22 years old. Thomas Hartwell. Eyes bright with certainty that the world made sense and justice prevailed. The same eyes that looked at Jackson from the mantel every day since he had arrived. Jackson's chest constricted. His hands began to shake. He read the article with growing horror, each word landing like hammer blows. 5 Hells Angels fleeing a bar fight. Speeds exceeding 80 miles per hour. Main Street intersection. Thomas Hartwell on his Honda CB 750, coming home from his evening shift at Bradley's Hardware. 3 weeks before starting officer candidate school, the names of the riders listed at the bottom. Curtis Shaw, Vincent Carver, Derek Stone, Connor Walsh, Jackson Rivers. Memory crashed over him like a wave. Not the gentle remembering of distant events, but visceral and immediate. The smell of whiskey and adrenaline. The sound of engines screaming. The bar fight that had spiraled into chaos. Derek with a broken bottle, blood on sawdust floors. Someone shouting that the sheriff was coming. Vince's voice cutting through the noise. "We ride, now." 5 bikes roaring into the October night. Curtis Shaw on his Road King, drunk and high on meth, pushing 85 in a 35 zone. Jackson following on his Softail, the same bike he rode now, young enough and stupid enough to think loyalty meant never questioning, never stopping, never breaking the code. The intersection, the impact, metal on metal, the sound of it echoing across 20 years of guilt. The young man in the Marine Corps jacket flying through the air, his bike disintegrating beneath him. Landing wrong. Neck at an impossible angle. Curtis had not stopped. None of them had stopped. Club code. Never leave a brother, even when a brother had just killed someone. They had disappeared into the night like smoke, leaving Thomas Hartwell dying in the street under stars that offered no comfort and gave no answers. Jackson looked up at Margaret. Her face was calm, but tears gathered in her blue eyes. "I wasn't driving," he whispered. The words tasted like ash. "But I was there. I saw him lying in the street, and I kept going." His voice broke. "He was wearing a Marine Corps jacket, Margaret. One of my own. And I left him like roadkill." The tears came then, the first time Jackson had cried in 30 years. Not the silent tears of private grief, but wrenching sobs that seemed to tear themselves from somewhere deep in his chest. All the guilt he had carried, all the shame, all the men he had failed in war and in peace. It came pouring out in Margaret's kitchen while morning light painted the walls gold. "Curtis Shaw killed him," Jackson managed between sobs. "But we all murdered him. By running, by not calling for help, by choosing the club over doing what was right." Margaret moved to his side, placed one weathered hand on his shoulder, said nothing, just stood there while he broke apart, bearing witness to pain 20 years in the making. When Jackson could finally speak again, his voice came raw. "How long have you known?" "Since the first day, when you told me your name." Margaret's voice remained steady, though tears tracked down her cheeks. "The police report listed all 5 riders. I recognized your name. And when I saw that 1984 Softail in my driveway, black and chrome, the same modifications described in the report, I knew exactly who you were. Jackson felt like the floor had dropped away beneath him. Then why? Why did you invite me in? Why help me? Margaret moved back to her chair, sat slowly, folded her hands on the table with the calm of someone who had made peace with difficult truths long ago. Do you know what I wanted to do when I recognized you? Her voice held no anger, only weary honesty. I wanted to take Robert's rifle off the wall and shoot you where you stood. I wanted you to feel what Thomas felt in those last seconds. Jackson flinched but did not look away. He deserved this, deserved worse. But then I looked at your face, Margaret continued, and I saw what the 20 years of guilt and running had done to you. I saw a broken man who had been destroying himself 1 mile at a time, one bottle at a time, one bad choice at a time. And I thought about what Thomas would want. She pulled another document from the envelope. A letter, the paper soft with age and handling. This is the last letter Thomas sent me before his death. He had written it in case something happened, even though he was just working at the hardware store, not deployed. He was like that, thoughtful, careful. Margaret's voice cracked slightly. He wrote, Mom, if something happens to me, don't let it make you hard. The world's got enough hardness. Be the soft place people can land. That's what you taught me. That's what I want to carry into my service. Jackson could not breathe, could not think. The weight of it was crushing. After Thomas died, I spent 3 years in rage, Margaret said. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't feel anything but hate. I lost 40 pounds. Drove away my other children with my bitterness. Jenny stopped calling. Paul visited once a year out of obligation, not love. I was dying, Jackson. The hatred was killing me as surely as if I had taken poison. Dr. Miller put me in therapy, said the anger would destroy me if I didn't find a way to let it go. The therapist asked me one question that changed everything. She said, what would Thomas want? Margaret touched the letter with reverent fingers, and I knew Thomas would want me to be the soft place people can land, even people who had failed him, even people who had run from responsibility, especially people who carried the weight of guilt like crosses on their backs. So when you stopped to help me with that firewood, Margaret's eyes held Jackson's, I had a choice. Turn away the man who helped kill my son, or give him the grace Thomas would have wanted me to give. I chose Thomas's way. Not for you, for me, for Thomas's memory. The silence that followed felt holy and terrible at once. Jackson struggled to find words adequate to the moment. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Redemption isn't about deserving, Margaret said firmly. It's about choosing to be better than your worst moment. Thomas believed people could change. So do I. Jackson thought about Curtis Shaw, the man who had actually hit Thomas, dead in prison in 2010, stabbed in a gang fight, never facing real justice, never making amends. What happened to the others? Curtis was convicted of vehicular manslaughter, 15 years. The rest of you fled the state. Witnesses couldn't identify you definitively. The case went cold. Margaret's voice carried no accusation, only fact. The town knows, Jackson, or most of them have figured it out by now. Dr. Miller, Sheriff Crawford, they were watching at the meeting to see what I would do, whether I would choose revenge or forgiveness. I chose forgiveness, so they followed my lead. That's why they let me stay. That's why we all let you stay. Jackson sat in stunned silence, understanding finally clicking into place. The town's initial hostility, the careful watching, the way people's attitudes had shifted after Margaret spoke. They had all been waiting to see if she would condemn or redeem. I killed your son, Jackson said, needing her to understand. Maybe I wasn't driving, but I'm as guilty as Curtis. I saw him dying, and I rode away. I know. Margaret reached across the table, took his hand in both of hers. And I forgave you a long time ago, not because you deserved it, but because I needed to be free. Free of the anger, free of the bitterness, free to be the woman Thomas raised me to remain. She squeezed his hand gently. Now the question is whether you can forgive yourself. Jackson had no answer for that. Forgiveness seemed like a foreign country whose language he had never learned. But sitting in Margaret's kitchen, holding the hand of the woman whose son he had failed, he felt something shift. Not absolution, not peace, but possibility. The distant hope that maybe, someday, he could learn to carry the guilt without letting it destroy him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing past what I was, for giving me a chance to be something different." "You're welcome. Now drink your coffee before it gets cold. We've got work to do." The mundane instruction, so perfectly Margaret, broke the tension. Jackson almost laughed through his tears. Only this woman could follow a revelation that should have shattered everything with practical concern about coffee temperature. They sat together in the strengthening morning light, two people bound by tragedy and grace, beginning the hard work of turning forgiveness into redemption. 3 days later, Jackson sat at Margaret's kitchen table at 3 in the morning, staring at his phone. Claire's number glowed on the screen. He had dialed it 17 times over the past week, hanging up before it could ring. Each attempt left him feeling more cowardly than the last. Margaret found him there, wrapped in Robert's old robe, walking stick in hand. She took one look at the phone and understood immediately. Having trouble sleeping? Keeps going to voicemail. The lie tasted bitter. They both knew he had not let it ring long enough to find out. "What are you afraid she'll say?" Jackson set the phone down, rubbed his face with both hands. "That she doesn't want to hear from me. That I waited too long.